you know what's crazy? Most people spend their lives trying to escape their thoughts, scrolling, streaming, distracting. But the real power, the real peace, begins when you stop running and learn to master what's happening inside your own mind. There's an ancient practice that doesn't just calm you. It literally rewires your brain. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your thoughts the same way again. There's a moment in every human life when you realize the noise in your head is louder than the world around you. You wake up, check your phone, chase validation, worry about what's next, replay what went wrong. You try to silence it with more noise, music, feeds, caffeine, chaos. But when it's quiet, it comes back stronger. That's not weakness. That's conditioning. The brain adapts to what you feed it. And for most of us, we've been feeding it distraction. But here's the beautiful truth: the same brain that traps you can also free you. And that's where the Stoics come in. The Stoics weren't cold philosophers or emotionless monks. They were warriors of the mind, people who faced betrayal, loss, failure, and still found peace in the middle of it all. The practice they mastered isn't complicated. It's awareness, a disciplined observation of your thoughts without judgment. And science now proves what they knew 2,000 years ago, that practice changes the physical wiring of your brain. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reshape itself, is activated every time you pause, breathe, and observe your emotions instead of reacting to them. You see, every thought you react to creates a neural connection. Every emotion you indulge strengthens a pattern. If you constantly react with anger, you're training your brain to fire faster in anger. But if you start noticing it, just noticing it, without giving it energy, the wiring weakens. It's like watching fire lose oxygen. The Stoics practice this daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just philosophy, it's neurobiology in action. When you learn to sit with discomfort, to observe the storm instead of being it, your brain starts building new circuits, pathways of calm, patience, and clarity. The amygdala, your fear center, quiets down. The prefrontal cortex, your rational mind, strengthens. You stop being a prisoner of impulse and become an architect of peace. Imagine being in chaos, but your mind stays still. That's not magic, that's mental training. But here's the twist: this rewiring doesn't happen from reading quotes or meditating once a week. It happens through repetition. The Stoics called it praxis, daily practice. Modern neuroscience calls it long-term potentiation. The more you practice, the stronger the pathway becomes. Every morning you reflect, every time you hold back anger, every moment you replace judgment with understanding, you're sculpting a new mind. You're teaching your brain that peace is possible. Not because the world changes, but because you do. Think about it: every challenge you face is a workout for your soul. Every insult is a chance to practice restraint. Every setback, a test of perspective. The Stoics didn't just talk about self-control, they lived it. They didn't suppress emotion, they transformed it. That's why their writings survived centuries. They touched something universal: the desire to be free within ourselves. And that freedom isn't abstract, it's neurological. Modern scans show that people who practice Stoic-style reflection, journaling, reframing, and meditative observation develop thicker gray matter in regions linked to decision making and emotional regulation. They literally build mental armor, not to become numb but to stay human in a chaotic world, to feel deeply without being destroyed by what they feel. Now, I want you to think about the last time you were overwhelmed. Anger, anxiety, regret. In that moment, your brain was firing old circuits. But what if instead of reacting, you just paused and said, "Interesting, this is what anger feels like." You don't suppress it. You just watch it. That 1 second of awareness is your mind rewiring itself. That's the spark of change. And the more you do it, the more powerful it becomes. You'll start noticing silence between your thoughts, a calm space that wasn't there before. That's where peace lies. Not in control of the world, but in understanding your reaction to it. The Stoics trained for this peace daily. They didn't wait for the storm to end. They became still in the storm. So, when life feels too heavy, when you're tempted to numb out, Remember this: your mind is plastic. It changes with what you practice. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, patience over panic, gratitude over anger, you're literally changing your brain. The Stoics knew this long before neuroscience gave it a name, and they left us a blueprint for mental freedom that modern science is just beginning to catch up to. The power of awareness is the foundation of every Stoic teaching, and the key to understanding how the mind transforms itself. It begins with the simple act of noticing. When you become aware of your thoughts, you step out of automatic living and into conscious existence. Most people spend their lives reacting to everything that happens to them, unaware that every reaction strengthens a pattern inside their brain. Awareness interrupts that cycle. It's the moment you realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer behind them. This shift is small but profound, and modern neuroscience confirms what ancient Stoics already practiced. Awareness reshapes the physical wiring of the brain through the mechanism of neuroplasticity. The mind changes itself based on what you repeatedly pay attention to. The Stoics called this prohairesis, the inner faculty of choice, the ability to decide how to interpret and respond to life. When you observe your own thoughts without judgment, you take control of that faculty, and with time, your brain learns a new rhythm, calmer, more focused, and deeply resilient. Imagine your brain as a garden. Every thought is a seed. Some grow into thorns of anxiety, others into flowers of gratitude. Most of the time, we're planting unconsciously, reacting to circumstances, and allowing weeds to take over. Awareness is like stepping back and realizing you have a shovel in your hand. The moment you observe a negative thought instead of indulging it, you stop watering the weeds. You don't have to fight them, you simply stop feeding them. Neuroscientists have observed that when you shift from identifying with your thoughts to observing them, activity decreases in the brain's default mode network, the part associated with self-centered rumination. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, becomes more active. This is the biological reflection of Stoic mindfulness. The practice of awareness literally quiets the emotional storm and strengthens the structures of clarity and self-control. Marcus Aurelius wrote nightly in his journal, dissecting his emotions, questioning his judgments, and reminding himself of perspective. He wasn't writing for anyone else, he was rewiring his own mind. Each reflection was a neural adjustment, a recalibration of focus and intention. Awareness, to the Stoic, wasn't some lofty spiritual exercise. It was a form of mental hygiene, a daily cleansing of false assumptions and emotional clutter. When you sit still and become aware of your anger rising, your jealousy forming, your anxiety spinning, you begin to separate stimulus from response. You realize that between what happens and how you react, there's a space. In that space lies your freedom. And when you start choosing your response consciously, your brain adapts to that choice. Over time, it becomes easier, more natural. You build a neural highway toward calm observation instead of impulsive reaction. The human brain, with its billions of neurons and trillions of connections, is a machine of habit. It doesn't distinguish between good and bad patterns. It only repeats what you reinforce. If you constantly respond with frustration, the connections that trigger frustration grow stronger. If you practice noticing your frustration instead of feeding it, those same connections weaken. This is the Stoic art of awareness, not suppression, but conscious reprogramming. You don't fight your emotions, you learn from them. You watch them arise, acknowledge their presence, and let them go. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Awareness is the power to catch that judgment in motion, to see it before it shapes your reality. And once you see it, you can choose differently. In a world overflowing with distractions, this practice is revolutionary. Every notification, every headline, every algorithm is designed to hijack your attention, to pull you away from awareness and into reaction. The Stoic practice cuts through that noise. It demands stillness, not the stillness of inaction, but the stillness of clarity. You train your mind to pause before you scroll, before you argue, before you react. You take a breath and simply observe what's happening inside. This pause rewires your nervous system. It lowers cortisol, stabilizes your heartbeat, and activates the parasympathetic response that calms the body. But beyond biology, it awakens something deeper, a sense of presence. You begin to experience life as it is, not through the distorted lens of automatic thought, but through clear perception. Awareness is not always comfortable. When you start observing your thoughts honestly, you see the chaos within, the insecurities, the fears, the hidden motives. The Stoics faced that discomfort head-on. They believed that awareness of weakness is the first step toward strength. Seneca wrote that the mind should be its own examiner, that by seeing our errors we learn to correct them. In today's terms, that's emotional intelligence. It's not about denying negativity, but transforming it through understanding. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, your brain records that moment. It creates a pattern of resilience, one that eventually overrides the patterns of fear. You start noticing you're less reactive, less shaken by criticism or failure. That's not indifference, that's mastery. Even modern therapeutic practices like cognitive behavioral therapy are built on Stoic foundations. They teach awareness of thought patterns, identification of distortions, and conscious reframing of perception. This is what the Stoics did intuitively. They didn't need clinical terms, they lived it. Awareness was their shield and their compass. It allowed them to stand in the middle of war, loss, and betrayal without losing their inner peace. And now science supports it. MRI scans show that mindfulness and awareness practices increase cortical thickness in areas related to attention and emotional regulation. The brain, through awareness, becomes more adaptable, more stable, and more compassionate. The Stoics may not have used the word neuroplasticity, but they were its earliest practitioners. When you cultivate awareness, you begin to see the subtle patterns of your own mind, the stories you tell yourself, the illusions you cling to, the fears that guide your choices. Awareness exposes them not to shame you, but to free you, because once you see the mechanism, it loses power over you. You realize that anger is not who you are, it's a temporary chemical reaction. That anxiety is not truth, it's an anticipation of uncertainty. That sadness, while deep, is not permanent. You become the witness rather than the prisoner, and the witness can always choose a different perspective. Over time, this repeated act of observation forges new neural paths, paths lined with patience, understanding, and courage. Think about how a muscle grows. It tears, heals, and becomes stronger. The mind works the same way. Awareness stretches your consciousness beyond comfort. Each time you observe a negative impulse and don't act on it, you strengthen your control. You train your brain to operate from reason rather than reaction. The Stoics practiced this constantly. They visualized potential hardships, prepared for them mentally, and accepted them without panic. This was not pessimism but neural conditioning. They were preparing their brains to remain calm under pressure, to stay aware when others lost control. And that awareness became their greatest weapon, not against the world, but against their own chaos, even in our era of science and technology. This ancient practice remains timeless. Awareness is not about emptying your mind or detaching from life, it's about becoming fully conscious of how you experience it. It's standing in the middle of noise and hearing silence. It's being aware of your breath while chaos unfolds around you. It's realizing that peace is not something you chase. It's something you uncover when you stop identifying with your thoughts. That's the Stoic secret. Awareness doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be present. And when you are present, your brain begins to evolve. You stop repeating the past and start creating a different future through every conscious moment you live. Neuroplasticity is the extraordinary ability of the brain to reshape itself, to rewire its pathways according to what we repeatedly think, feel, and do. It means the brain is not fixed, it's living, breathing clay that molds itself around our habits, our attention, and our emotional patterns. The Stoics understood this principle long before science gave it a name. They believed that by mastering thought and emotion, by choosing how to respond instead of reacting blindly, we could transform the mind from chaos into clarity. Every time you resist a destructive impulse, every time you observe a thought instead of indulging it, you are engaging in a mental exercise that physically alters your brain. Neurons that once fired for anger or anxiety begin to weaken when ignored, and new pathways of calmness, reason, and patience grow stronger through repetition. This is not philosophy in abstraction, it's biology in motion. The Stoic life is a daily training ground for neuroplastic change. When you begin to understand this, you realize how much control you actually have. You don't have to be a slave to old habits, to emotional overreactions, or to past trauma. The wiring of your brain is not destiny, it's a record of practice. The Stoics practiced mental discipline through reflection, meditation, journaling, and rational analysis. These weren't religious rituals, they were neurological workouts. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal not to sound wise, but to rehearse new mental patterns. Each repetition was reinforcing a circuit of reason over emotion, focus over distraction. Science shows that repeated cognitive training like this increases myelination, the insulation around neural fibers that speeds up communication. What this means is that consistent mental discipline literally makes the new habits of thought faster and easier. The Stoics, through their devotion to rational awareness, were creating faster pathways toward virtue and serenity inside their own brains. Every emotion you experience triggers a neural cascade. Anger lights up the amygdala, fear activates the limbic system, and self-awareness engages the prefrontal cortex. The more you surrender to anger, the more those amygdala pathways strengthen. The more you resist, the more your prefrontal control centers grow dominant. It's like building a road. Every time you travel a certain path, it becomes clearer, smoother, faster. The Stoic understands that the mind is constantly under construction. They knew that what you practice repeatedly becomes who you are. That's why they train themselves to pause, to breathe, to question their own thoughts before reacting. That pause is neuroplasticity in real time. It's your brain choosing a different road and slowly building it stronger with each use. Over weeks, months, years, this rewiring becomes visible in your personality. You become more patient, more stable, more centered. It's not easy, because neuroplastic change requires effort and consistency. The brain loves what's familiar, even if it hurts you. Old circuits of fear or resentment feel comfortable, simply because they've been used for so long. The Stoics knew that freedom was uncomfortable. They believed in voluntary discomfort, training the mind to detach from ease so that it could grow stronger. Epictetus, born a slave, said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In the language of modern science, this means mastery of your own neural patterns. To be free is to take charge of your mental wiring, to stop running on autopilot. The Stoics practiced visualization of hardship not to torture themselves, but to desensitize their neural responses to fear. By imagining loss, pain, or failure, they trained their brains to face those events without panic. That is the essence of neuroplasticity. Conscious, deliberate exposure that rewires fear into courage. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies on mindfulness and cognitive reappraisal show that repeated self-observation and reinterpretation of emotion lead to structural changes in the brain. The prefrontal cortex thickens, the amygdala shrinks, and connectivity between them improves. This means better control over emotion and less susceptibility to stress. The Stoic practice of reflecting on death, loss, or adversity wasn't morbid. It was mental conditioning. Each reflection was forging a resilient neural network that could stay calm in chaos. In contrast, a person who reacts impulsively strengthens circuits of anxiety and helplessness. The brain is a mirror of practice. You get better at what you do most often, whether it's worry or awareness. The Stoics chose awareness. Repetition is everything. You cannot change a habit by thinking about it once. The Stoics wrote daily, meditated daily, questioned themselves daily. Neuroplasticity depends on repetition, frequency, and intensity. Each repetition is like laying another brick in a wall of self-control. Eventually, what once required effort becomes automatic. You don't have to fight every urge or thought. Your brain learns to default to calm. This is why Seneca advised, "Cease to hope and you will cease to fear." He wasn't dismissing emotion, he was training himself to redirect his expectations. Hope and fear, both born of uncertainty, activate the same emotional pathways. By releasing attachment, he rewired his mind towards stability. Every Stoic teaching, from temperance to courage, is a neuroplastic exercise, shaping not just character but neural structure. This process changes your relationship with pain. When you know your brain adapts to everything you face, suffering becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. The Stoics saw adversity as a forge. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Neuroscience translates this into adaptation. Each challenge you survive forces your brain to form new pathways of endurance and learning. The same stress that once crushed you becomes the weight that strengthens you. Your brain doesn't grow through ease, it grows through resistance. The Stoics practiced this truth not by avoiding pain, but by meeting it with awareness and discipline, allowing it to sculpt a stronger mind. They knew that the mind trained in difficulty becomes unshakable in peace. There's another layer to this rewiring, the emotional intelligence that emerges from self-awareness. When you pause and reflect instead of reacting, you're teaching your brain empathy. You begin to understand not just your own emotions, but those of others. Compassion, patience, and understanding are all neural skills that can be developed through repeated awareness. The Stoics practiced this by imagining themselves in others' positions, recognizing the shared frailty of all humans. Marcus wrote, "When you wake up, think of the privilege of being alive, of thinking, of loving." Such reflections activate neural circuits linked to gratitude and interconnectedness. Gratitude itself is a neuroplastic phenomenon. It rewires the brain for optimism and resilience. The more you practice gratitude, the more your brain learns to perceive abundance instead of lack. The fascinating part is how closely this aligns with modern therapeutic methods. Techniques like cognitive, behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction operate on the same principle as Stoicism: awareness, reframing, repetition. They use the power of neuroplasticity to change thinking patterns, emotional responses, and behaviors. A Stoic journaling in ancient Rome and a modern patient doing cognitive exercises in a clinic are engaging the same biological process, deliberate neural rewiring. This connection proves how timeless Stoic insight is. The Stoics didn't have fMRI scans, but they understood that discipline of thought changes the very structure of the mind. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, patience over anger, or gratitude over resentment, you're strengthening the pathways of peace. The old patterns don't disappear overnight, but they fade with disuse. Your brain begins to crave stillness instead of drama, reflection instead of noise. You stop living as a victim of emotion and start living as the author of it. That's neuroplasticity manifesting as Stoic virtue. It's a slow, invisible revolution happening inside your skull. An ancient practice proven by modern science. And through repetition, humility, and discipline, it becomes the foundation of real freedom, not the freedom of circumstance, but the freedom of mind. Stoicism as mental training is one of the most powerful ideas ever conceived, because it turns philosophy into a living practice rather than an intellectual game. The Stoics never sat around arguing about abstract theories. They treated philosophy like an exercise gym for the mind. Just as the body grows stronger through resistance, the mind grows sharper through disciplined reflection, restraint, and repetition. Every moment of anger held back, every judgment examined, every hardship accepted with grace was a mental workout. To a Stoic, the world was not a place to escape from but a place to train in. They believed that the purpose of life was not to avoid difficulty, but to become strong enough to meet it with virtue. This daily training of the inner self wasn't just moral, it was neurological. Each repetition of calmness in the face of chaos, each act of patience under pressure, reshaped the brain's patterns, building endurance and emotional strength that no external event could easily break. Think of it like sharpening a blade. A dull blade doesn't cut effectively, and the mind, left untrained, reacts blindly to life. The Stoic trains by observing reactions, questioning them, and replacing them with deliberate responses. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal and loss, he didn't seek comfort or distraction. He turned inward and asked himself, "Is this within my control?" That single question is a mental exercise, one that rewires how the brain processes stress. Modern neuroscience supports this idea. Conscious reframing of perception reduces amygdala reactivity and strengthens the prefrontal cortex. What Marcus practiced in his journal was not passive reflection. It was a form of cognitive training that created mental resilience. The same principle applies today. When you feel insulted, anxious, or afraid, you can either react impulsively or observe the emotion and reinterpret it. That act of reinterpretation is a Stoic drill. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes, until it transforms from a conscious effort into an automatic habit of peace. Stoic mental training is grounded in discipline. The Stoics began each day by preparing their minds for what might come. They visualized potential challenges, insults, failures, pain, loss, not to make themselves miserable but to strengthen their acceptance of reality. This practice, known as premeditatio malorum, was mental armor. It trained the mind to face life as it is, not as we wish it to be. Neuroscience now calls this stress inoculation, the idea that controlled exposure to discomfort strengthens emotional resilience. The Stoics did this long before psychology gave it a name. They knew that avoiding discomfort weakens the mind, while meeting it consciously makes it unbreakable. By imagining worst-case scenarios, they taught their brains to remain calm when reality struck, reducing the element of shock that often turns pain into panic. Journaling was another pillar of Stoic training. It was not a diary of events but a tool for self-examination. Each night, Stoics like Seneca and Marcus would review the day, analyzing their choices, reactions, and thoughts. This reflection reinforced self-awareness, helping the brain recognize patterns of behavior and emotion. Repetition of this practice carved new mental grooves of rational thinking. Over time, they became less reactive and more composed. Modern cognitive therapy mirrors this same process through thought records and self-monitoring exercises. The brain learns through observation and correction, and the Stoics practiced that principle with precision. Their training transformed reflection into rewiring. The Stoics also trained through restraint, which they considered a form of strength. They believed that every emotion has a moment of birth, a spark before the flame. If you catch that spark with awareness, you can redirect it. When anger rises, you pause. When fear whispers, you breathe. When pride swells, you remember humility. Each act of restraint weakens impulsive pathways in the brain and strengthens the circuits of control. Modern neuroscience confirms that consistent self-regulation reshapes neural connectivity between the emotional and rational centers of the brain. Stoic restraint wasn't repression, it was refinement. It wasn't about suppressing feeling, but mastering it. This kind of discipline allowed them to act with reason even when emotion burned strong, to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. Another element of Stoic training was reflection on nature and perspective. They practiced zooming out mentally, seeing themselves as part of a vast, interconnected universe. When Marcus Aurelius looked at the stars, he wasn't escaping his problems, he was putting them in proportion. This habit of perspective shrinks the ego's grip and softens emotional extremes. Neuroscience now understands that perspective taking activates the prefrontal cortex and helps regulate emotional responses. It's like looking at your life from above, realizing that no event is truly catastrophic in the grand scheme of existence. The Stoics trained this perspective daily, so their minds could return to equilibrium no matter how turbulent life became. It's a form of mental altitude, a calmness that comes from seeing everything from a wider lens. The Stoics were also masters of intentional focus. They trained attention like a warrior trains precision. They knew that the mind, if left uncontrolled, scatters itself across worry and regret. So they practiced anchoring thought in the present moment, in what could be done now. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, wrote Marcus, B1. That's mindfulness in action. The act of focusing on the task at hand, free from distraction, is a Stoic meditation. Modern studies show that mindfulness meditation increases gray matter density in areas of the brain associated with learning, memory, and emotional balance. The Stoics achieved similar results through their own meditative awareness, though they didn't call it meditation. They simply lived it. Every action, no matter how small, was a chance to practice presence. Discipline was the glue that held Stoic training together. They believed that freedom came not from indulgence but from control. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." To him, discipline was liberation. The disciplined mind doesn't chase every desire or crumble under every fear. It acts according to reason, guided by virtue. This discipline extended to every area of life: speech, consumption, thought, reaction. The Stoics were minimalists not for aesthetic reasons, but for mental clarity. They practiced moderation to free the mind from dependency. Neuroscience backs this up. 2 habits of restraint reduce dopaminergic overactivation, stabilizing mood and increasing long-term satisfaction. The Stoic brain wasn't addicted to pleasure, it was trained for peace. The beauty of Stoic mental training lies in its practicality. It doesn't require temples or gurus, only intention and awareness. Each moment becomes a lesson, each trial an exercise. When someone insults you, that's an opportunity to practice humility. When something delays you, that's a test of patience. When loss strikes, that's training in acceptance. Life itself becomes the gym where the Stoic mind grows strong. This approach transforms suffering into purpose and uncertainty into education. It's a philosophy of engagement, not withdrawal. The Stoics didn't run from life. They met it with courage, curiosity, and discipline. Their training didn't make them emotionless. It made them emotionally intelligent, capable of feeling deeply without being destroyed by feeling. This form of mental training leads to a remarkable calmness, a serenity that doesn't depend on external conditions. It's not denial but mastery. The Stoics cultivated inner stillness through repeated exposure to chaos, much like a pilot learns calmness through storms. The more they trained, the less external turbulence mattered. Their peace came not from circumstance but from strength of mind. This kind of peace is not fragile, it's forged. It's earned through every moment of awareness, every act of restraint, every reflection on truth. The Stoic doesn't escape emotion, they elevate it. Their mind becomes a disciplined instrument, capable of reasoned response, steady focus, and unwavering clarity even when life is unpredictable. That is Stoicism as mental training, a process of refining thought, strengthening will, and rewiring the very structure of the brain through daily acts of conscious control and awareness. Becoming still in the storm is the highest expression of Stoic mastery, because it represents the moment when understanding becomes transformation. It is the point where philosophy becomes instinct, where awareness and discipline merge into effortless calm. The world will always be unpredictable. Loss, betrayal, injustice, chaos, they come for everyone eventually. The Stoics didn't seek to escape this reality, they sought to remain unshaken by it. They knew that external stability is an illusion, but inner stillness is possible. This stillness is not indifference or passivity, it's power. It's the ability to act wisely without panic, to see clearly when others are blinded by emotion. It's a state of mind so deeply trained in awareness and restraint that no external turbulence can easily disturb it. The Stoics saw this as true freedom, a liberation not from life's storms, but from being consumed by them. Stillness begins with acceptance. The Stoic doesn't fight the existence of chaos, they accept that it's part of the natural order. What they train to master is their response. When you stop demanding that the world be calm, you begin to cultivate calmness within. This shift in focus rewires the mind's relationship with stress. Modern neuroscience reveals that acceptance reduces activation in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and increases connectivity with the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought. The Stoics practiced this centuries ago through a simple understanding: peace is not found in control, but in surrender to what is beyond control. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the universe is change and life is opinion. To him, this was not fatalism but clarity. Once you see that you can't control external events, your energy naturally returns to what you can: your attitude, your choices, your interpretation. This redirection of focus builds the neural circuits of resilience. The brain stops overreacting to every disturbance because it has learned where its true power lies. Stillness in the storm requires perspective. The Stoics constantly reminded themselves that everything is temporary, that time dissolves all pain and all pleasure. When you internalize this truth, urgency loses its grip and fear loses its edge. You begin to see life as a flowing river rather than a battlefield. This perspective doesn't numb emotion, it balances it. Neuroscientists have discovered that this kind of cognitive reframing reduces the brain's stress response and increases feelings of control and coherence. When Marcus looked up at the stars, he wasn't escaping his troubles, he was realigning his perspective, reminding himself of the vastness of existence. To him, the insults, ambitions, and misfortunes of daily life were specks against the infinite. That realization gave him peace in chaos. Modern humans, overwhelmed by endless information and constant noise, can find the same stillness by doing what the Stoics did. Zooming out, seeing the larger picture, remembering how small the storm really is compared to the vastness of being alive. The Stoic stillness is not passive silence, it's active awareness. It's the mind fully awake, yet undisturbed. When life strikes, the Stoic doesn't flinch or flee. They breathe, observe, and respond with intention. This pause between stimulus and response is sacred space. It's where reason takes over from emotion, where choice replaces impulse. Every time you find this pause, your brain learns. It weakens the pathways of fear and strengthens those of control. Over time, that moment of pause expands until it becomes a permanent foundation, a calmness that you carry into every situation. The Stoics trained this skill relentlessly. Seneca wrote that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That delay is the beginning of stillness. It allows your body to calm, your thoughts to settle, and your actions to align with wisdom rather than instinct. The modern world is louder than ever, and the storms are constant. Social comparison, information overload, endless craving for attention. True stillness now feels like rebellion, but the Stoic path offers an antidote. You don't need to isolate yourself or reject the world. You need to master your attention. Stillness grows where focus is disciplined. When you stop scattering your awareness across distractions, you reclaim control of your mental energy. Neuroscience calls this directed attention, and it's linked to increased gray matter density in brain regions associated with memory, concentration, and emotional regulation. The Stoics practiced this naturally by focusing on virtue, on what was right in front of them, and ignoring everything that wasn't essential. They didn't waste thought on gossip, wealth, or fame. Their stillness came from clarity of purpose. When you know what truly matters, noise loses its power over you. Stillness also comes from humility. The Stoics understood that arrogance and control are illusions. They accepted that they were part of something greater, a vast cosmos guided by reason and change. This humility dissolved anxiety. When you stop believing the universe revolves around your personal narrative, disappointment loses its sting. Humility creates spaciousness in the mind. You no longer react as though every inconvenience is a personal attack. Instead, you see events as neutral forces shaped by causes beyond you. This mindset fosters serenity. In psychological terms, humility quiets the ego, reducing activity in the self-referential networks of the brain. The less the mind clings to me, the more peace it feels. The Stoic, through humility, becomes aligned with nature rather than at war with it. Stillness doesn't mean inaction, it means clarity before action. The Stoics were leaders, soldiers, and statesmen. They acted boldly but with composure. Their stillness was what made their actions effective. A calm mind makes better choices, and neuroscience supports this. A regulated nervous system improves decision-making, memory, and problem-solving. The Stoic trained for this through reasoned reflection. Before reacting to events, they paused to ask, what is within my control? What is the right thing to do? That simple question pattern, repeated daily, rewired the brain to default to logic instead of panic. In time, they didn't need to remind themselves. The calmness was built in. Their mind had become a fortress, not by isolation but through constant practice of perspective and control. This kind of stillness also has a moral dimension. It is not selfish detachment but the foundation of compassion. When you are no longer thrown around by your own emotions, you can truly see others. You can act from understanding rather than judgment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that everyone errs out of ignorance, not malice. That thought kept him calm among conflict. Compassion, neuroscience now shows, is linked to activity in regions of the brain associated with emotional regulation and empathy. The calmer your inner world, the more capable you are of kindness. Stillness makes space for love, for patience, for forgiveness. It removes the fog of ego so you can connect to others clearly, without defensiveness or pride. To become still in the storm is to master the art of letting go, not of caring, but of clinging. The Stoic learns to let go of outcomes, to act with virtue regardless of success or failure. That detachment rewires the brain away from anxiety-based motivation and toward intrinsic purpose. You no longer chase peace through external validation because peace has become your default state. Modern psychology calls this internal locus of control, a mindset proven to increase happiness and reduce depression. The Stoics lived by it naturally. They acted from integrity and accepted whatever followed as part of nature's design. Stillness, for them, was not an escape from life, but a way of engaging with it more consciously. The beauty of stillness is that it grows in proportion to your awareness. The more you practice it, the more it expands. At first, it might appear in small moments, a deep breath in traffic, a calm response to criticism, a quiet acceptance of delay. But with repetition, those moments connect, forming an unbroken thread of peace that weaves through your entire life. It becomes part of your identity, part of your brain's architecture. The Stoic doesn't wait for the world to be calm to feel calm. They bring calm to the world. They carry a silence that can't be disturbed by noise, a peace that chaos cannot corrupt. That is the essence of becoming still in the storm, a state of awareness so steady, so grounded, that even in the wildest winds of existence, the mind stands unmoved, clear and deeply alive.